was the cherry on top for the whole trip. We went shooting. And we had a great time. Then we went to Jim and Nick's barbecue, the Auburn location.
I was one of the most stuffed I've ever been in my life.
It was so good. Oh, my God. Their cheese biscuits.
It was at the point, though, where it's like, I have eaten too much.
Yeah.
Because I had a couple of beers, too.
Uh-huh.
So I felt like, to foreshadow, a person was just going to burst.
So,
I got the itis real bad from it.
We all have the itis. So me, Frank, and Goodnight go back to my house. And
it's like, well, what are we going to do now? And it's like, I don't know. We're all just kind of falling asleep, and Rivers started a fire.
I built a fire.
Yeah.
And that was nice. And just when the fire got going, my mom came home with this guy. His name was Bob. And to imagine Bob, all you have to do is picture Mark Twain. So if you have a mental image,
Mark Twain, if he ordered from an LL Bean
right,
catalog.
that's what I was going to say. You take Mark Twain's head, cut his head out of the magazine, put it onto an LL Bean catalog magazine. Just a button-down Hagar slacks.
Yeah.
Just a casual Mark
Looking
Twain.
like Eddie Bauer himself.
Yeah, but with Mark Twain's head.
Okay.
And it's sort of Mark Twain's sense of humor.
Yeah, and he had a big mustache, white mustache, crazy white hair. Turns out this guy's a multi-millionaire. My mom later told me that he is the former president of like 22 companies. Like basically he would just start a company, get it to where it's making him money, and then he would sell it and start another one. That's been his entire life. Mm-hmm. So this man is very, very wealthy. And
but he had good dignity.
But he was great, yeah. And he would sit there and he was about half in the bag, and he was just telling these amazing stories.
He had an incredible way of telling a story because he would find the most bizarre details of the story.
And extrapolate upon them.
Just tell you that, then throw you in an aside, which was even more bizarre.
Yeah.
And then all the stories would end on a low note where somebody died.
Or there just wasn't an ending. The person just disappeared into the fog of memory.
Well, I mean, which was some notable ones?
So my
trying to reconstruct these has been like trying to reconstruct like the experience. I feel like, almost the apostles writing the Bible.
See, I was going to say it's like putting together the fragments of Heraclitus,
Yeah.
But you're sitting there, and this is how he actually sounded. You go like, oh well, my dear friend, I mean, he must have weighed 500 or 600 pounds, and he was sitting on a stool where he worked at the convenience store, and he fell off the stool, and he burst.
There was a lot of people, just fat people, just bursting.
And they took him to the hospital.
That does not happen.
He goes, they took him to the hospital, and they must have scooped 70, 80 pounds out of him, and they said, you got to stop working out. We're not going to scoop another 80. And that was just it. And we're like,
well, I mean,
what the fuck happened?
Well, there was an uncomfortable racial aspect to many of the
no,
stories,
and
there was
like,
also
what the fuck
an uncomfortable swollen testicles aspect to at least two of the stories.
Well, with the guy that burst, we're like, what the fuck happened? He was like, oh, he had brain cancer. Died many years later.
He died
many years later.
We couldn't go over that house because the people were shot over there. They were shot.
And that's just like an aside. So there was all these.
They were shot to death. They were gunned down.
There was the story about the Klan dog. Do you remember that one? Because the Ku Klux Klan was in way too many of these fucking stories.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, he's from South Carolina. And
yeah,
so there was
he lives on a plantation.
Yeah, there was a certain
plantation.
casual attitude towards certain brutalities.
Yeah.
Which gave it that lovely, I like to call it that lovely Southern flavor.
All the brutalities. Everything he said was brutal, and there was a casualness.
No.
But there was, remember the one with the Klan dog?
Yeah, what was that one?
And its testicles swelled up.
And he would drag them along the ground.
It was dragging. Literally, it was dragging them on the ground. And I took them to the doctor, and the doctor fixed the testicles and all that. And then the Klan came back, and they said, "That's our dog." And they took the dog back.
And I don't know, was that the punchline, or was
that was like an aside to a larger story?
Was that the one about the maid, the big 300-pound black woman? And all she did was, because she had worked with the family for years, and all she did was open the door for the dog and let the dog in and out. And she was big. She must have been about 300 pounds. And later on, she became the mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nowhere. She became the mayor? It's like, yeah, she got into politics and she became the mayor.
Yeah, that was one where it was like, she was like, oh, she just sits by the door opening the door for the doggy because the dog has to go from one room to the other. I was like, why don't you just let this woman retire? And she goes, oh, she's far too old to retire. Like,
well, I think it was one of them things, like with family servants like that, where it's a job for life.
Yeah.
But apparently, though, I mean, she did good on her own, breaking up in politics.
Became the mayor. My favorite though was this. Where he's talking about this guy. He was like
quadriplegic.
Yeah.
There was actually 2 quadriplegic stories. There were 2 everything happened in twos with this because there were 2 quadriplegics. There was at least 2 300-pound people that broke open at some point. And there were 2 like testicle stories with swollen testicles. And only one, I think, was involved with a dog.
Yeah, it was like he goes, oh my friend Robert Johnson, he was beaten by the Detroit Police Department. They beat him till he could no longer walk anymore, until he was a quadriplegic. He sued the Detroit Police Department, and he got a $22 million settlement. He bought himself a Johnny Cash tour bus and a band of whores. And the whores drove him, and they would turn him. The whores turned him so he wouldn't get sores. And we're like, and?
It was like his own magical mystery tour. with some quadriplegic girl driving across the country in a Johnny Cash tour bus and just being rolled around by hookers like he was dough or something.
No, my question was, when I heard the story, was that were they actual sex workers, or were they just like medical professionals, care professionals that he just like called him that to embellish the story?
Like, I don't know, because I think they were whores.
They were whores,
and that was generally his word for in a sort of prostitute like that or something. I mean, he could have got nurses, he could have been hospices, but probably whores work cheaper.
Yeah,
and have more benefits come sponge bath time and things like this. So we drove cross country. Now, I don't know. Remember how this story started? I think it was about police brutality.
Yeah,
and it ends with this sort of bizarre version of the Partridge Family.
Except it's horrible.
And by this point, I think our jaws were on the ground. If you can actually be asleep, it was like you're falling asleep and somebody's punching you in the face.
I mean, I almost threw up at one point. I was laughing so hard, and we were just so full of
air
barbecue.
left my brain.
And my mom, meanwhile, is like, Jesus, Bob. Stop! Like when he was telling like the stories about the dog balls and stuff.
Remember he had the other one too with the twins who spoke their own language.
Oh yeah.
And the German, there was a German or something. Somebody was German and they had twins, and these twins spoke their own language. Like, well, is this language German?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's some language that only twins understand, which is apparently some actual condition.
Yeah.
How did that one end? Was somebody killed?
Probably.
There was like stock endings. They're killed by the Klan. They die of some horrific thing like brain cancer. They explode. They become a quadriplegic.
They become the mayor.
And then later he died.
He later died. He died many years later.
I just imagine this guy just full of Canadian Club whiskey. Just like,
I mean, yeah. It was magic. It really was.
He was a great man.
Yeah. Oh, and then the
Is
part.
He listening? Because I want to say thank you, brother, for so much entertainment.
Dude, I want him to come out to LA so bad, but the point where Goodnight and I looked at each other and almost died was where he was talking about. He was like, I've taken many trips to Paris, and underneath the streets of Paris, in the vaults, you can get these amazing salts. The salts from the vaults.
And salts from the vaults.
And he actually said salts from the vaults, and that's what Goodnight and I looked at each other. We're like, we have to talk about this dude on
the new name.
That's the name of this episode.
Well, he was talking about, have you ever been to the they used to have the silver vaults. It was about some rich person that you could keep valuables in a bank vault.
Yeah.
So they go in and they get these beautiful, they're silver salt shakers. There's the salts from the vaults. And this is just in the middle of some other story.
Some other story. This is a tangent.
Sometimes his stories would take you to Europe, but then they would end. It was like an NWA promo. They'd start talking about Europe, and then they'd end back being in the county he lives in South Carolina.
Yeah. It was.
Wow.
The salts from the vaults.
Wow.
What did the salts actually do?
Oh, I know he had his maid, because he was like, the maid, we caught her vacuuming. She would move the chair around because she couldn't walk anymore. She was much too fat. And she would vacuum. And then when she would get done vacuuming that area, she would move the chair. And then she would vacuum some more. And I said, Josephine, our carpet is starting to look like a floral pattern. So we just had her, before we moved her to the doggy door, we had her straightening the salts. You know, the salts from the vaults.
And then she died.
And then she died. Well, she became the mayor, and then she died. She was assassinated. An assassin's bullet cut her down.
How old was this fella? His stories just span generations.
Well, he graduated. He graduated with my mom, and so he'd be 67-ish.
I thought he was older than that.
Nah,
He's timeless.
he is timeless. He really was. He was like the
Wow.
very specter of the South.